Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our EMUE ACE webinar series, segment 16. Today, we are going to be talking about EMUE for Millennium. So joining us today, we have Kelly Blackman. Kelly is our product manager. He joined Databound in 2012 and became a product manager in 2015 and is the product manager for Clean Scout as well as EMUE. And today, he's going to be talking a little bit about our journey in creating EMUE for Millennium, as well as discuss the use cases and give us a couple of Millennium demos. My name is Dan Cortez. I am the lead EMUE trainer here at Databound. I joined Databound in February of 2018. And today I will be discussing the syntax changes for EMUE for Millennium and the applications that we are using currently in Millennium and where you guys can go to get additional resources. And then without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Kelly to start sharing a little bit about our relationship with Cerner, as well as talk about the start and the journey of creating EMUE for Millennium.
Good afternoon, everyone, or morning in some cases. We've been working obviously on Millennium for a while, and some of you have probably already had some demos around it, but we wanted to take the time to give you a progress update on where we are and what our timelines are, and really I guess a timeline of how this all started. Clearly client driven. You can see that I guess there was 64% that were already live on Millennium, so there's a lot of need out there already, which we know. Clients that have used EMUE for Envision, some people that have used it for Soaring. Question always gets asked, when are you guys going to support automation for Millennium? So really all this stuff is driven by our clients and their use of EMUE in the past and their ability to be able to solve problems. So clearly we wanted to move into this space as well. That was the easy part people wanted. Then we ran into some technical challenges with the way that Millennium itself is hosted and supported by Cerner. Most everybody is remote hosted, which means you typically access via some Citrix client. So everything is really pixels and images on a screen. And we know that there are challenges associated with being able to automate effectively. We really wanted to take the approach similar to how we approached automating Soaring, which we've had some pretty good success with. And so it was really critical for us to get past some of the technical challenges. And so we have been able to do that working directly with Cerner, which I'll talk to in just a minute. The third part of this is we started development back in March, at the end of March this year. Did some preliminary work to get prepared for it. And so we were able to hit the ground running pretty well in March and have something that we could even demo within a few months inside of EMUE itself. So we've been at a place where we can run commands, we can execute workflows. We're working with some beta partners as well. We've even got some people that are getting ready to put their first scripts into production. They've been tested and everything. So we've made some good progress on that. We're still working on some other things as well. We expect to be fully launched by the end of Q1 of 2020. So we're again, EMUE is in a state where it's able to execute scripts right now and run things. The part we're really working on is the ability to have you guys write your own scripts and identify things and build commands and that sort of stuff. So we're working on that. We're actually in that development cycle right now. I don't have anything to show you on that today, but that'll be coming within the next few weeks. We'll be able to show something on that. So that's kind of where we are. We couldn't really have done it without the partnership from Cerner. So we partnered with them. They've given us an environment to work on. They actually provided us a server that we've been able to develop on, do some testing on, and that has really been instrumental in us being able to get past the hurdle of the technical challenges that we had. They provided the access to Millennium that we're using the thick client in order to be able to connect directly to the application. As I had said before, there's challenges with just doing it across Citrix. The second thing we're able to do is understand use cases that clients want to solve. We've been researching this for quite a while as well, so we really know a lot of the things that people want to do. And but we were able to understand how those things work, what applications we use them in, what are the steps to be able to replicate those workflows. And so working with our beta partners has been really helpful as well. And then I guess lastly, a deployment model. Cerner's really been instrumental too in helping us be able to roll this out. One of the things that they've allowed us to be able to do, or allow clients to be able to do, is host VMs in their environment, in their own environment with EMUE on it that accesses your environments. A lot of people have self-hosted before VMs. but they've come up with a structure that allows, obviously, there's costs associated with that. Rolling that information out, though, and allowing people to run servers in their environment to be able to run EMUE on a thick client, that's one option for people to be able to do. And so they've made it really easy to take advantage of that. And so it helps with kind of the setup. It really streamlines the process. So they've been really helpful in terms of that as well.
We are working currently in 3 applications in Millennium right now. The one that we've spent probably the most amount of time in is the revenue cycle application. For this, we've been doing things such as, demographic updates, creating encounters, posting freeform and predefined comments. A lot of things that are very similar, I think, to what we've done previously in Sorian Financials. In addition, we've also worked in the Bedrock application too. We've worked with doing provider enrollment aliasing, so claims that are on hold until the provider enrollment date is entered. Also associating new locations to each health plan and vice versa, so new health plans to each location. And in addition, we've also worked too in the scheduling appointment book, so moving labs and radiology requests to clinic request lists. That is the general outlook of what we've done with applications.
Yeah, those first two are more financial focused. The scheduling appointment book is a client we've been working with on the clinical side of things. They don't they're using Sorian for revenue cycle, and so they had some things they wanted to do on the clinical side as well. So the scheduling appointment book is related to that. We're also working on other areas as well. PM Office is a big one. I think a lot of you that might sound familiar to what your processes are. We can work in PM Office. We're working on a feature that allows us to be able to log in. I don't know if a lot of you have used Sorian before, so there's a log on to Sorian command. There's some technical reasons why we want to create a log on to Millennium command, but that's preventing us right now from being able to launch that and fully attach to those applications that start up. But we're working on that as well, and we should have that in the near future. So we can, once we get behind that, we can already automate things in that particular application through the conversations, if you're familiar with that. Some other folks have also expressed interest in the CS pricing tool and charge viewer. Those both pose a few technical challenges that we're working through as well with something called a spread control. I won't go into too much detail, but they're Excel looking sheets that are embedded in the application, and the data isn't necessarily readily available to something like EMUE. And so we're working through that for those two applications. But the majority of what our users have wanted to do so far, there's either been a workaround in the revenue cycle app in terms of charge viewer. Most of what needs to be done there, if instead of toggling charges, for example, we can go in and add the modifier or credit a charge or something like that. So all that stuff has, I think, more than one way for it to be done, but we'll continue to expand our reach into the other apps as well. In terms of use cases, Danica mentioned a few of them: registering patients, creating encounters. I know that's one that's been going on for a while. A lot of people are going to Cerner scheduling and registration, which means they're going to have a couple systems like Sorian and Cerner, where they're going to have to keep those things in sync and create encounters in Millennium as well. So kind of keeping that information up to date. A lot of people are doing insurance scrubbing. There's some services out there that allow you to go and search for information or do verification ahead of time, and you need to go in and update insurance, for example. Medicaid is one where people typically do a kind of a last ditch effort to find insurance for folks for self-pays or for something like that, where people want to go out and search, or they've done a verification ahead of time and a policy number's changed, so now we want to go into Millennium and make an update. That's something that we're going to be utilizing EMUE for. Prior authorizations is another big one, making sure that we go into the system and make those updates as well. I'm going to actually do a demo of both of those two use cases, the updating insurance information and updating prior authorization, so you can kind of see what that looks like. The last one that we're talking about here is modifying charges and rebilling. Got a number of clients that are doing charge updates through EMUE or want to do that. We've actually got a couple of the first scripts we're putting into production are charge updates. It's either could be adding a new charge, it could be crediting a charge, it could be adding a modifier or another code on there. So those things are the ones that we've currently been working on, and we'll have them in production very soon. And there's a lot more use cases than that. I guess I could share some other ones with you. Resolving work items, for example, late charge or denial with zero balances, completing balances to resolve debit credit on zero balance encounters, small balance write-offs, resolving payer denials, for example, that don't affect the payment, and then posting comments and things like that that you want to do for keeping track of records and that kind of stuff.
Okay, great. I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the syntax changes because we have moved from web scripting, which involves opening up a website and interacting in that way, whereas Millennium is application based. So we've had some syntax changes with those changes. So one of the first things that you will see is that a lot of our commands no longer include opening a website or like open web page or type web value or click web element. We've gotten rid of the web part to differentiate it between the website and the application that we're interacting with. And so on line 179 at the top, it says rev cycle, and then there is the application that we are opening. And that's going to be linked to this rev cycle kind of variable that we use throughout our script. So once you've decided on application name, then that follows you with your command. So your commands for like 180, for example, it says type value first name rev cycle. That rev cycle appears multiple times because you're interacting with that application itself. In addition to that, you can also see too that our element strings have changed a little bit. They're surrounded in square brackets. There's a pipe delimiter for the particular parameters within that string. The first one that you'll see is name, and name is not a required field, which is also, I think, pretty interesting that we have changed not having required fields as much. So name, for example, is something that is not required, although it does differentiate other elements from each other. For those of you that do web scripting, it's similar to the attribute. And then also the index too is not required. So on line 180, you can see that there is not an index of 1 or an index of 3. The index is a default of a 1. So if you do change that, for example, if you have to have an index of a 2 or a 3, then you would have to mention it, but it does default to 1. The one field that is absolutely required is the type field, and that is your control type. So that would be, for example, if you're looking at a button or a checkbox or a menu or a menu item of some sort, that's where this type would be. And so when we go to type a value in, we are typing it into an edit field. And then on line 181, I just wanted to kind of showcase how our anchoring looks. It's pretty similar to our web scripting in the sense that you still have the element that you're anchoring on, and then afterwards you go to the element that you actually want to select. That has remained the same. However, it's a little bit different in the sense that we're no longer having the anchor in your element string, which is the hyphen and the greater than symbol. That's not there. Instead, everything is surrounded in those square brackets, separated by pipe delimiters, and there's a space between the referenced element and the element that you are selecting. In addition to that, I also wanted to talk a little bit about some of the installation requirements. The first one is, and it's already been mentioned by Kelly, is that you will need a Cerner client hosting with a thick client installation, which means that Cerner is hosting it and they create a VM for you that has Millennium and EMUE installed on the same machine. It's not that we're going through a Citrix server or something like that. It's that EMUE and Millennium are installed on the same exact platform. And then in addition to that too, you'll also need to purchase a Millennium license, which is on a per PC basis. It's a little bit different than how we've done other licensing structures, but I'm not going to go into full detail about the licensing structure. And then I'll hand it over to Kelly to discuss a little bit more about our current and long-term goals and dive into our early adopter program and show a demo.
Obviously, one of the big things is being able to run disconnected mode. I think all of our clients have become accustomed to be able to lock a workstation and run a script or schedule a script in off hours and not have to be there looking at it and watching it run. That's something that we have to solve for. This is a little bit different because we're in some cases with the application, we're actually having to issue some direct mouse clicks or some typing to the forms in order to get the information in there. A requirement for that is that a mouse and keyboard be not physically available, but virtually available at least. And if a screen becomes disconnected, you could potentially lose that. It could cause your scripts to stop because it won't be able to issue the click. So we've got a path forward on that. That's going to be part of the solution of by the time we launch in 2020. So we don't see any challenges associated with that. We have path forward on it, but we have to do things a little bit differently than what we've done it with the web and with Terminal in the past. And then automatically logging in. It's one of those things that if you've been using EMUE before, you know that server updates happen, reboots happen. being able to automatically sign back in because EMUE needs a desktop in order for it to be able to launch an application and be able to run stuff. We have a path forward as well on that, although it's not anything that's you're used to seeing or the way we're doing things now in EMUE. There is the ability to have an auto logon process that stores information in the registry. Unfortunately, that's a unsecure location for storing credentials. So we're going to have to come up with a different path that works for our clients and also works for Cerner security standards as well. So we're going to be working on a way to automatically log the machine back in as part of this whole process. The user interface, I mentioned that earlier. We're working on a tool right now. I'm not going to call it the Web Script Builder 2.0 because it's going to be completely different, completely new. Hopefully the experience will be improved over that tool. Not that it served us well, although there's a lot of improvements we could do to it. So we're building something brand new to help address identifying controls in Millennium and also assist with the building of the commands. So we've got things mocked up at this moment now, and we're in the process of building some of those things out. And then the last part is, I also mentioned this earlier, expanding our reach in the other apps, addressing the spread controls, the Excel-like spreadsheets. Our primary focus when we got started was revenue cycle, because that's where a lot of our clients are and a lot of the needs are. We haven't done as much on the clinical side and some of the other apps that are out there. There's an app for everything on the Millennium box. If you've ever looked at the number of apps that are out there, there's probably 100 or 200 different apps you could launch at any given point. So clearly we haven't addressed all of them. We think our approach will overlap with a lot of it, but as we roll this out, we'll make sure that we can validate those use cases ahead of time. So that's where we're going. We're going to accomplish all that stuff here within the next 3 to 4 months and have it tested and everything ready to go again by the end of the first quarter of 2020. And then I guess the next thing is we're targeting, again, like I said, 2020. We are working with clients ahead of time. Some people have some really important needs. They're really more interested in the results than building the scripts themselves. And so we've got an early adopter program simply because, like, again, EMUE is in a place where it can execute the workflows. That's not the challenge. The user experience is really where we're trying to make sure we're ready before we officially launch it. There is an early adopter program if you're interested. If you've got some very urgent things that you would like to get started on without having to wait until end of March or April, that's something that you can take advantage of right now. I'm going to offer that really through the end of the year. We've launched it several months ago, something we mentioned at CHC. So we've had some posts and things like that out there about it. But if you haven't heard about it before, really what we're allowing you to do is just take benefit of what you can already do with EMUE. So the way that the early adopter program starts is we would certainly want to validate the use case first. Again, EMUE doesn't touch every app, so we'd want to make sure that what we have built will actually address your workflow. So if it doesn't, then certainly you wouldn't want to get started right now until we have been able to address that. The second part is a licensing and consulting proposal. And the way this would work is if you did want to become an early adopter, you'd pay a discounted rate for the licensing, so you wouldn't pay full price, clearly, because the product isn't fully ready for you to use. We would offset that cost, but we'd also have some consulting built into it to help provide some value there. So while you wouldn't be paying for the entire product, you'd still be getting value out of it along with the consulting, which is a one-time fee for that. Once we determined that everything was okay and we signed off on that, we would get an environment set up, configure the server. This part of it's actually pretty easy. I mentioned before we've got 3 or 4 clients now that are using the Cerner VMs. They've got a good process down to get those things set up. You really contact your client owner and request it. There's a contract or something you have to sign. Of course, it'd have to go through your own approval process, but the actual technical configuration of this is pretty straightforward. If you've used EMUE with Sorian or you used EMUE with Terminal before, we've had the Rumba requirements and licensing for that, and for web, Internet Explorer is a requirement there, and some settings that we need to be able to do to make things work. So this one's actually install EMUE is really about all there is to it. You don't really have to jump through a lot of hoops to get everything configured in order for it to be able to run. So that part of it's really, really straightforward. But that's the third step. Once we get all that stuff set up, then obviously we would implement the use case and and go through some testing and make sure that everything is working okay. It's pretty much a consulting kind of short-term deal. I guess the other thing I'd point out is that the benefits of the early adopter program is that you realize some value right now, so you don't have to wait. And then the other part of it is there's the pricing that you get stays in effect until you renew in 2020. So if you were to adopt the early adopter program right now in December, that pricing stays effective. Even though we fully launch in first quarter, you wouldn't pay the new price. You'd continue to get what you've got until you renewed back in 2020 of next year. Just a high level overview. If you really wanted more details on that, we would have a deeper conversation about the needs there and how to go about tackling it. But we just want to make sure that our users, because there are 64% of you that responded to the poll earlier, are already live on it. So you may have some pressing needs, and we just wanted to make sure that if you want to take advantage of it, the opportunities there. Enough talk, I guess. It's time to show you a little bit about how it would work. This is an example of a script I'm going to do that does charge updates. As I've mentioned before, I'm just going to go ahead and put a breakpoint right here as I talk through it. What this script does is go in and look up a patient and then look up the encounter. Then it goes in and finds a particular charge in the charge list, selects that one and adds a modifier to it and saves it. And it's going to kind of repeat that. I've got a for loop set up. It's just going to do the same one 4 times here. And then I'll show you a different script that uses an input file that does the insurance authorizations. You'll notice that it does take a few seconds for the application to load. That's normal. Once it gets open here, I'm going to kind of step through a few things and show you a little bit, and then I'll let it run full speed so you can get an idea for how it actually works. So this is using, like Dan had mentioned before, this is how we're identifying an element, and this is its attributes. This is the type of control it is, and this is the name that it has. This is the kind of stuff that we'll use the command builder or the locator tool to help you identify these things and build the commands. As we step through, you'll see that we execute the click. It clicks on the button up here at the top, and we bring in the person search dialog. I've got some sleeps placed in here throughout. Just one of the things with the Windows applications is really fast, and sometimes I've had to slow it down a little bit. We've got it in a really good spot, but occasionally there's a little hang up where I want to put a sleep in there for some reason, and one of those things is around that pop up there. So we'll continue to refine that, but occasionally we need to put something in there like that. We've got the very similar commands if you've used web before, the subset of commands that we have for those: typing, clicking, setting a checkbox, setting a drop down. As I step through, you'll see that this checkbox just became unchecked. Now we're going to assign a value to a variable, and we're going to type that value in, and then we're going to click the search button. Okay, so now we get our patients up here at the top that are very similar and close to that name, and then as the first one is selected, all the encounters are below. EMUE can read these lists here. They look very similar. They're different control types. These are trees, and this is a list. Visually, they look very similar, but as far as the code is concerned, they are quite different. We've got a generic command called getList. In web, we used to have getWebTable, or we had getWebGrid or something like that. Now we're just saying getList, regardless of what kind of control it is. If it's in a list format, we're just reading it into an EMUE list. And so you can see, after executing the getList command, we've got all of our data here. There's 54 rows. It doesn't show you there's 54, but we look at the last one, 1096. The last one in our list is 1096. So we're able to get that information, and we continue to issue commands as we would. We're going to click on this one, and we're going to click on the first encounter in the list to make sure we've got the right ones. You can read through this information just like you could any other script, just using your list processing, doing get list member and that sort of stuff, and doing if statements to compare to make sure you got the right row. I'm just going to step through. You'll see it click on the correct row. If the row that you want is not in view, it'll automatically scroll it into view and click on it. So we get to the patient account screen and we're on the charges tab, and you can see here we've got a list of charges. I'm just going to go ahead and step through this as well. We're going to read another list. And now we've got all the charge information as you see visually on the screen. Okay, so we can determine which charge on this list that we actually want to work with. For this particular scenario, I'm just clicking on the second one in the list. I'm setting my list position to 2. You'll see that EMUE then selects that particular row, the second one, and then it's going to come over here to this menu and it's going to do modify charge. So as we run those 2 commands back to back, you'll see it run through. And then it's going to do another couple of things like clicking on the codes link and finding a particular okay. So it brings up the menu. It's going to click on codes, and then there'll be some other things here that we interact with. So right now I've got it clicking on codes. It's going to type in a 25 in the modifier field, select it, set some things in the drop down. I'm going to let it run through here so you can see kind of how it works. Okay, so you can see that it added a 25 modifier up here. It set other as the drop down and put a note in as test. I'm end up just canceling out of this window because I don't want to change any information. But another command that we have is called get value. You might be recognizing it's very similar to get web value, except we're not doing web. But you can see that it returned that particular modifier link up here with a 99205 with 25, 26, and 25, and it's in our variable here that we hover over. We can see that value there. So we're able to add the modifier, then we're able to read this particular value again and validate that we got the value that we wanted. We were able to prove that we added the modifier we wanted to. So as this continues to run, I'm going to clear all the breakpoints and just kind of let it run at regular speed. You can see how it would normally function in terms of performance. Revenue Cycle is a little bit of a slow app, so there's a lot of stuff going on with it, but you can get an idea for how it's processing here. There's one more to go through after this, and then it'll stop. And then I'll show a different one, which is working on adding the insurance and authorization updates. There's a couple of ways to close the script when it's done. You can issue commands to come up here to file and exit. That's what these 2 commands are. There's also a close app command, and you can, this actually kills the process. So if you run into something like with error handling where something you've encountered unexpectedly and you want to close the app, this will actually kill the whole process. And get rid of everything. If you have a dialogue or something that's up and you try to come over here to file, you won't be able to click on it. So we got close app here that will just kill the whole process, and you can relaunch it and start over, similar to how we do with web scripting. But I'm just going to run through this. You'll see it click on file and exit. It happens really fast, but then the window's gone. One more I'm going to run through. This one's using a file-based input. A couple of other things to notice about this one. We do also have a command for element exists. So you can check to see if an element is present on the screen. We're going to add another one to verify that something is available to be used, because some things may be there, but they may be disabled for some reason. So we're going to work on adding additional commands as we go. But let me go ahead and start this one up because it does take a few seconds to load. This is searching for an encounter. We went to the encounters view now, and we're clicking on the encounter details. And this one here is going to select an insurance here and modify it. So it finds the first one in the row, clicking on the modify button and going to the tab, and basically just updating the member number and the begin date, and making a save on that change. We're going to do the same thing again on this one. I think there's about 5 or 6 records, and some of them do authorizations, and some of them do insurance information. But and they're basically very similar in process. So we're looking to the insurance tab, finding and reading the insurance that we want to update, modifying it, typing in the numbers, and clicking OK, and moving on to the next one. Very typical EMUE process. There could be more involved steps to be done with this. I know that not everybody, again, uses the revenue cycle app. So some of these things can be done on the PM office side of things through a custom conversation. And we can interact with that stuff. If this isn't necessarily the way you go about doing it, I feel pretty confident we can address it through other methods as well. So just don't necessarily want to get hung up on the particular app that we're using here. This is just the one we started with. And so this is kind of rinse and repeat. You'll see it kind of going through the same motions here. Again, some of them are doing authorizations and some of them are doing insurance information. So Danica, maybe we can turn it back over to you while this is finishing.
So while we're, as Kelly mentioned, we're in the process of thinking about how to build this command builder. So we wanted to know, would you guys be willing to work with us on building this out?
And just to be clear, this is kind of like helping validate the use of the tool. So we want to make sure that we learn our lessons that we've learned from the past, like through web scripting, and just make sure that we're kind of doing things in an efficient way. One of the things with the web script builder, it requires a lot of clicks to build commands. We really want to get away from having to click on a lot of stuff, just a lot of steps to build a command. We'd like to be able to transition away from doing that kind of stuff to being able to really build most of the workflow and record the steps to it. Again, brand new approach, totally different tool. We'd really like to make sure we get some feedback from users.
And then we did want to give you 2 additional resources, or where you can look right now to see what updates are coming to you. So right now, I would say our website is a great place to look and see what our current updates are for Millennium, as well as getting resources. When the training resources are developed, they will be placed in here underneath the support tab. And I will show you too kind of what our website looks like. It's just been revamped, so it is brand new. It's pretty awesome. And at the top too, you can see to request a demo too. If you do want to receive a demo that's more geared towards what you're working on, please feel free to reach out. Let us know. We're here for you. And the other item I have there too is we did just create a space on our community forum. We kind of saw that everybody was all across the board. Some of you had Millennium already installed. Some of you, you're going to have it installed 3 months from now, 6 months from now. So this is a great place to kind of share your experiences with each other and what you're learning as you go through the motions, as well as a place to ask questions of the community too. And then this isn't available just yet to like the public at this moment, but I just wanted to give you kind of a look at what this will look like at some point. We will have a Confluence page that will have a list of our commands and control types, and really just an overview, kind of similar to our help topic that you guys probably frequent for our web scripting. This is where that will be located. So I would say check back here and just see if it's up to date.
One thing on that, we've sort of migrated our documentation a little bit. It's still inside of EMUE, but for the dashboard documentation, that's hosted on. You may not be familiar with Confluence. It's an Atlassian tool. We use it for our development and for Jira, if you've ever heard of that. But Confluence is a kind of a documentation tool as well. And so we're in the process of anything new we're doing, we're putting it there. Also keeping up to date the stuff that we have that's built inside of EMUE, but eventually we'll want to move everything over to here where it's all in one place. So if you're not familiar with that, this is new to you. So just wanted to share that that's something new we're working through as well.
Great. Thank you, Kelly. And then I want to see if there are any questions that any of you have. All right, we do have one question. Are there any clinical use cases that can be used for this?
There's only a couple that I'm aware of right now, and one of them is what I talked about before about request queues. That's the one we're working on with one client where they have radiology, and I forget what the other one is, but they're in their own request queues, and they're trying to get them to clinic request queues based on the physician. So it's kind of more of just a cleanup thing that has to be done. Another thing someone mentioned before to us was going and looking at some of the documentation and the clinical documentation and being able to read some information out of that to help support a particular workflow. I don't remember exactly what it was, but more around documentation stuff, I think, and kind of aligning work.
And that's all I have for today. Kelly, would you like to add anything before we close out?
Just really appreciate your attendance. It's been a while since we had one of these webcasts, and the response to this one was really awesome, and it was great to see over 60 people show up. That's really awesome. So please engage with us. We're here to help you, and if you need any more information, let us know. And again, appreciate your time showing up today and listening to us.
Absolutely. Thank you all for joining us.